Well, thank you, Brittain, for being here today. Brittain Wells, right?
Correct.
All right. So, thank you, Brittain, for being here today. I'm so excited to talk to you. Today, I just want to hear a little bit about your story and some of the interesting perspectives that you have around some of the issues we're dealing with public safety. But first, can you just tell us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Yeah, I am a licensed and board certified behavior analyst. I've been a behavior analyst since 2011. Um, I have worked significantly in the autism population, which, if anybody's familiar with behavior analysis, that's often where we kind of get, that's the corner we're in
Right.
typically. But I also spent several years as a contractor for the majority of our charter networks here in Memphis. So I worked in schools in North Memphis and Fraser and Raleigh and Orange Mound and Hickory Hill and South Memphis
So
and
you've been working with young people for years.
for all of my life, really. I started working with children when I was 11, nannying every summer. So
Oh,
I
wow.
have never not been
Yeah.
without a
So
child.
you have
Yeah.
great life experience. Well,
Yeah.
I'm sure you know that one of the major topics of conversation in our community right now is around public safety. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective from your lens. How do you look at some of the negative criminal behavior that we've seen from a behavior analytics perspective?
Yeah, so, as a behavior analyst, I just kind of look at everything as problem behavior. So you've got different levels of problem behavior, different degrees of severity or intensity or um, frequency, duration, or, all of these metrics that we use to describe behavior. And we now have this one called criminal behavior because it's not just breaking rules, it's breaking laws, right?
Right.
And so that's really the only reason why we call it criminal. There's not really any other reason. And for me, I think sometimes it does us a little bit of a disservice because criminal behavior has this irreparable value, right? It when people hear this person's a criminal, I don't want to hire a criminal. I don't want to do things with a criminal, right? It's got this context that's really hard to remove when in fact they've just broken rules. And some of them it's really bad rules, really bad laws. Some of them it's not as bad. But if we're looking to reduce or to change those behaviors, if we're really looking to make an impact, it's really looking at it as problem behavior and how do we change it? So in the behavioral sciences, we know a lot about changing behavior. We know a lot about reducing behavior using
Right.
sometimes punishment, most of the time reinforcement, lots of skills acquisition, right? Teaching.
Right.
I know that you met with the leaders of the various gangs in the community, and that's what they said. Our kids need skills,
Right.
and that's what we know without a doubt about problem behavior.
Yeah.
Whether it's a child throwing a tantrum at a grocery store because the mom said no to a candy bar, or unfortunately a 14-year-old doing donuts in the middle of an intersection with guns, right?
Right.
It's all problem behavior. And what we know about problem behavior is that it means that there's a skill that's missing, whether it's communication, whether it's logic and reasoning, rational thought, the ability to have perspective taking, right?
Right.
That's a
Right.
really difficult skill. So
So let me ask you this. I mean, what do you think causes this behavior to emerge? Like, where does it come from?
So a lot of it is your learning history. It's a lot of it. So behaviors don't happen in a vacuum. They don't. It's not simple. There's not an easy explanation as to
Right.
why someone would do something that the general public would look at and be aghast, right? And when you look at someone's learning history, you have to take into account what is their education level? Where are their developmental skills? So we call it education level in the general population, but as a behavior analyst, I'm going to look at where is their development, right? If I've got a 13-year-old engaging in what we consider criminal behavior, where are they living when it comes to their development? Are they in first grade? Are they in third grade? And in those, even what we would categorize as grades in the academic world, where are their further skill developments, right? Just because you can memorize some things and potentially pass a test at school doesn't mean that I've developed the appropriate skills necessary to know that my perspective is not going to be the same as your perspective.
Right.
And those things are critical for my success as a human being. And that my ability to know that if I go to jail today, that has long-term impact. And if I don't have the cognitive capacity to think through those things,
Right.
why, I always laugh when I talk to people about it. I don't know why we would expect anything different when you've got people who are often starving for all of their basic needs. Proper nutrition. One thing I always say, I working in schools, I see what kids eat, and it unfortunately is really terrible often. Right. And I think, and I'll tell parents, think about the days that you've eaten nothing but just junky food all day, and how bad you feel, and it gives you kind of a sluggish brain. And imagine a child who consumes nothing but that, right? They might be taking in enough calories to survive, but they don't have proper nutrition for brain function. And then proper nurture, right? That is critical. Making sure that children feel safe and secure and loved is exceptionally critical for their development.
Absolutely.
Because that's where that perspective taking comes in. I don't want to hurt your feelings because I love you and you love me. And starving for things to do,
Right.
and in behavior analysis we have these terms, right? So when you are lacking reinforcement, you're being put on extinction, right? When reinforcement is no longer being provided to you for whatever, it might be for food or attention or access to things. And when you are put on extinction, what always happens is called an extinction burst. So there's a point, it's the child in the grocery store that the mom said no to the candy bar. First, it's, can I have this candy bar? And the mom says no, and the child might whine or stomp their feet and says, can I please have this candy bar? And it escalates, right? Until they're on the floor kicking and screaming and, throwing this big tantrum that's causing everyone in the store to look. And that's what's happening with that kid with the gun and doing donuts in an intersection.
Right.
They're going through an extinction burst. They have now gotten as creative as they possibly can to have their needs met. And it's hard, especially for someone who doesn't understand behavior the way that I do. I think for the, general population to understand that that's a cry for help. That's a cry for, I don't know what I'm doing with my life.
It's so interesting because you're saying it from the behavior analytics perspective and you have that background, but it's the same thing that I've realized and noticed too, that what we have are a number of people in our community that are starving for something, starving for attention. And when I say attention, I don't mean attention just to be, funny attention.
No,
I mean, like
attention.
They're starving for nurturing, care, love, that kind of attention. And I think that's a part of what we have to acknowledge and realize as we start thinking about solutions. And so I'm gonna flip that back on you. You started to talk about it earlier, and how you can actually change behavior, but what is required? What are the things that need to happen in order to change that type of behavior?
Yeah, it's I'll be real honest. It's not, we didn't get here in a simple way, and we're not going to get out of here in a simple way. It's taking these individuals, and it's not just sending them to jail or sending them to prison, and those places, those things have their place for certain things, but only if we are truly working to rehabilitate. They got there, individuals who need to go to any type of detention, regardless of what it looks like or feels like, there has to be some basic level of skills assessment. Why did they get here? What skills are missing that led them to be in a place where they're doing things that, are considered just socially inappropriate by the general population, right? Or criminal by the general population. And so looking at, what are your problem solving skills? What are your communication skills? How do you seek attention, right? I have spent the better half of my career teaching individuals how to appropriately seek attention. A lot of people laugh at me because my child excessively says, "Excuse me." And it is the best, because in any situation, when you've got a 3-year-old running up saying, "Excuse me," parents and adults look, right? Versus if they don't look, then it's going to escalate. He's going to get frustrated. He's going to do something that will cause other attention, and that will reinforce the problem behavior. And it will happen regardless of what that problem behavior is, whether it's a 3-year-old seeking a bag of chips or, whatever it might be, or a 16-year-old who has seen these things happen in his community, has seen the impact on like social media, right? Like, I get a lot of attention here. Everyone's liking it, everyone's following it, everyone's sharing it. I get all this attention, right? And it works. So why wouldn't I do it? I don't have any other, I don't really have anything else to do. And even beyond that, I know one of your big initiatives is working on giving these kids things to do in their communities. But I would take it a step further. We're going to have to teach them how to do those things in their communities. And we're going to have to build in reinforcement systems for when they go, because they're not going to get as many likes on Instagram.
That's actually where I was getting ready to go. I had a conversation with somebody, and they were telling me about how crime is taking place in this generation and how so much of it is being fed by social media, and how many of the conflicts that are happening in real life on the streets stem from social media life, and the conflicts and the attention that people get on social media, and how that feeds a part of their basic needs. And I'm thinking about how, and I don't know the answer to this, but how do we offset that that gain that they get by posting a video of them doing donuts in the middle of the street and getting all this attention, or fighting at school or wherever it is. Like, those are the things that get attention on social media, and what makes you kind of a social media rock star. How do we replace that attention with something that is more positive, that gives that person that same feeling of value?
And that is a beast of an answer, right? That is a beast. I would encourage you. So in behavior analysis, we use the terms positive and negative a lot, and without the connotation of good and bad, because everything has value, right? So for the individual who's fighting at a school and they're recording it and it's been shared 100 times, and that attention for them feels positive. That feels reinforcing and positive, right? In the terms of good and bad, that feels good to them. And so it's all about value. How much value is placed in attention-seeking behaviors that get a lot of attention on social media. And so what, as a behavior analyst, we go in and we do value assessments. We do preference assessments to identify, where do your values lie? Where do not your values as in your moral values, but your what feels good, right? So when I am providing reinforcement to an individual, if I gave you $100, that would feel some kind of good to you, right? If I gave you $1,000, that clearly has more value, and it only has value because we've just placed it there, and because it gains access to backup things, right? What we call backup reinforcement. I can go buy a candy bar, I can pay my bills, I can do whatever. But beyond that, we've got to look at what is valuable for a 16-year-old in 2024, and what is valuable for a 16-year-old in 2024 in Orange Mound or North Memphis or East Memphis or anywhere, or Germantown, is going to be different per the individual. There will be some continuity, but it's going to take some degree of a concentrated lens of how do we replicate the good feelings that they get, and in a way that isn't criminal, right? That isn't breaking laws. And For some children, that may be. I had a kid in a classroom once who was just, the quote unquote the class clown, right? Clearly, getting laughs out of people
Right.
was very valuable to that individual. So what we did was we taught him how to say appropriate jokes based on good behavior. He got a little stand-up show at the end of the day in his whole classroom. So he was able to still access that reinforcement, that same value, that same good feeling that he got from his peers laughing, but in a way that didn't disrupt the classroom, that allowed the other children to see him in a more positive light versus a nuisance, right? Which not only impacted him, but it impacted the class and impacted the teacher.
Yeah.
And so replicating those types of things, but there's no one size fits all, you know.
No, I love that because it's playing to the individual's strengths and allowing them to maximize their potential from their perspective. So there's a lot of conversation around punishment and how do we ensure that young people or people in general know that there are repercussions to their actions. What is your perspective on punishment? And obviously we know that jail is one of the punishments that we use in our state, and I mean in our country, rather. And love to hear your perspective on that. And I'll just share, when I was on the campaign trail, there was a debate, and one of the questions was around the value of jail, and do you believe that jail is a transformative, or that it reforms people? And my answer was that I don't think it necessarily reforms, but I think it's just for the crimes. I think that there should be a punishment that is just. And I got a lot of flack for saying that I didn't think it was transformative or that it reforms a person. And I think it can if we did more things in jail while you have that captive audience. But I just don't think we've maximized it as a country.
I mean, I would say in your defense, there's not a shred of evidence that says that jail reforms people. You know, our recidivism rates are far and beyond anything that would indicate that sending someone to prison works. By and large, there are always outliers, but punishment, so in behavior analysis, punishment means something different than I think what the general population often thinks it means. So punishment in behavior analysis simply means that you've done something. You've either instituted some sort of consequence, you've added something in, or you've taken something away. I've taken away rights or privileges, and the behavior reduces. And it only is punishment if you see the behavior reduce. So what I would beg to say that in today's society, jail and prison, in fact, is not punishment. And it's not because it's not quote unquote bad or doesn't, that I think everyone assumes that punishment has to be really awful, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be really awful. It has to reduce behavior. And so I don't necessarily think that conceptually jail is bad or prison is bad or any type of detention centers are bad. But if our goal is reduction of this behavior, right, then we should be looking at it from that lens versus right now it's just it's a holding place.
Right.
You've done something that society doesn't like, and we don't want you to do it again, at least for the next 10 years, right? And we hope that by the next 10 years, you may have had a light bulb moment where you say, oh, I don't want to come back here. Right. But again, in reality, that's not actually what's happening. And so looking at it again, so your first question, punishment generally doesn't work. So in order for punishment to work, it has to occur every single time a behavior occurs, or it has to be so severe that someone would avoid it. And then when you get to that so severe level, we're teetering on some serious ethical issues, right? So I give an example when I do trainings. I had an instance of punishment in my life that worked. I was traveling back to graduate school, and I went to graduate school in Michigan, and I have to drive through Illinois. There's a county in Illinois, Pulaski County, Illinois, and they are known for pulling people over.
Right.
And I was sandwiched in like 7 cars. I was literally in the middle, and I think we were going 70. It was a construction zone, so that it was speed limit was like 55,
Yeah.
or whatever. And unlike in the South, construction zones, most other parts of the country, speeding fines are doubled regardless of whether workers are present. You know, the little caveat under the construction zone sign. And so this cop was on the other side of a like a overpass, and just outside of his car, just pointing people to pull over. And so he pulls us over. We get the ticket. It's a mandatory court appearance. And so I had to go back 8 hours. It was still an 8-hour drive to school. So when I had to go to court on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, I had to take off Monday to drive down. I had to get a hotel room to stay the night, be there at 9 for my court appearance, and it was a $675 speeding ticket.
Wow.
I will tell you, once I hit Pulaski County, Illinois, no matter what, my cruise control is set for 5 under the speed limit, because I'm never experiencing that again.
That was just enough punishment for you to know that.
But, and luckily enough for me, I'm in a place where I could drive back down, and I could pay for the hotel room and the gas and the $675 speeding ticket.
So with that said, what do you say to those that will hear this and think that your perspective is we shouldn't be putting people in jail?
That is absolutely not my perspective. Yeah. So, but we should be thinking critically about what are we doing to reduce behavior.
Right.
If we send someone to a detention center, and the first step when they get there should be skills assessments. What IQ assessments, skills assessments? What is their capacity to learn? And so we know, right? Not to justify differential treatment, but to critically and scientifically understand what is this person's capacity to learn. Let's maximize that learning capacity, whatever it is, whether they have a below average IQ or an above average IQ or just an average IQ. Understanding what skills are missing and working on those in the best method that would lead them to success outside of detention, right? Let's do some preference assessments. Let's do some skills assessments. Let's do some motivation assessments. Identify where their motivation lies. Do they love making people laugh? Well, let's harness that. Do they really enjoy being outdoors? Let's harness that. Let's teach these skills that they need in a way that applies to something that they will be more likely to be motivated to do when they get out of detention, versus just holding them there, connecting them with other criminals, and then letting them out and crossing our fingers that they won't do what they did again, when we know that history tells us this is not a system that is working.
Yeah, I think it's pairing what I had said earlier about it being the just response to a criminal offense with the behavior change necessary to prevent it from happening again.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's reconceptualizing it, right? It's not punishment by definition if they do it again, right? And so there's 2 pieces. There is a piece of justice that needs to be served, but justice doesn't always mean punishment, right? In the technical sense, we feel like it's punishment. You know, it's the child getting spanked, but then the child goes and does it again, right? So we feel like it's punishment, and it's not to go light or easy on people, but it's to take a proper look at what we're doing, and are we changing things?
Yeah.
Are we just in this a rat in a wheel? Are we just continuing to go because change feels uncomfortable?
Yeah. So this will be my last question. I serve as mayor of Memphis, and while under my purview is Memphis Police Department, and our team's working hard to make sure we get people off the streets. The criminal justice system is largely not under the purview of the mayor, but certainly we want to influence those things. But if you was giving advice to me as mayor, what advice would you give me in regards to how we move the needle on reducing crime in our community?
I think a big step of it is going to be, to some degree, rebranding what crime is and what a criminal is. again, like I started, no one wants to hire a criminal. No one wants to socialize on a Saturday night with a criminal. Just if you know, right? This person walking in is a criminal. I don't even know what they did. Just give me that word. They could have littered, in the wrong place.
Right.
But that instills a significant amount of fear in most people. And with some instances, that fear is just, right? But in large part, that fear is not just, right? And so looking at it and taking a broad sweeping campaign, if you will, to influence the way people think about people that are breaking rules that are defined as criminal. And understanding that nothing happens in a vacuum. Nothing is simple.
Right.
And individuals who ended up here breaking these rules that we call crimes, it didn't happen in a very easy way. This child was born into the world just like everyone else was, and they got here somehow. And part of it is learning, how did they get here? What is their learning history that led them here? And what is currently at play in their community that says this is okay to do, right? And so as mayor, I would say looking at different ways to showcase people who, quote unquote, would be criminals, giving opportunities for people who are willing to open their lives to say, these are the number of traumas that I was exposed to from age this to age this, which you can do MRI brain scans and identify what that does to the brain. This is the food that I have access to. This is the kind of community that I've had access to. This is the number of hours I spend on social media. These are the people that I spend my days with. I had a parent in one school that when I worked over at Hume's, who came in. I supervised an alternative learning classroom in that school, and one of my students was in 7th grade. He had a 10th grade brother, and these guys were like the guys that I would want walking with me at any point in time, because I would feel safe and secure at all times. Right. Not fat guys, just like big, linebacker type of a guy. And I met with that mom, and she just is hysterically crying and talking about how every May she quits her job and goes on social services until they go back to school, because that way she knows they're at home with her, right? Yeah. And they're not out running the streets. And not every parent has the opportunity to do that, or the wherewithal because of their own learning history to do that. And so just helping the broader population understand that everyone is trying their best given what they have. And some people just don't have much. And so their motivations lead them in ways that we in our cultural norms would consider inappropriate or criminal.
Right. Well, I just want to say thank you for sharing. Your perspectives are much needed, and I think it helps us to really look at the big picture for how we're going to turn our city around. Yeah. We are all working hard from many different angles, and I think your perspective is very helpful, and I look forward to working with you moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
As a citizen here and as a third generation Memphian, I feel it already. So
great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.